essentially what I'm going to be speaking about today is how to build conversations, how to develop meaningful exchanges with other groups and actors invested in social impact, and how that in turn can contribute to this process of scaling that we've been talking about. So I think essentially what I want to start off by talking about is the strengths that we hold, and that first obvious strength that I want to name is the fact that we are many. We are so incredibly many invested in the work, and we're incredibly many invested in the work as opposed to the not very many that are invested in perpetuating their hegemonic hold on the power structures. And essentially what I'm going to keep going back to over the course of this little talk is, again, this notion of power that we've been talking about. But yeah, we're so many, and we're diverse, and over the course of our work, we address all sorts of different things, from housing rights to addiction counseling and popular education, and we're doing all sorts of stuff. And that's great. But where the problem comes in is that oftentimes we work in silos. We work in silos for a number of different reasons. One is because of physical limitations, because we're in our respective cities around the world, in our different neighborhoods, and we don't necessarily have the capacity to directly build immediate links with other people, especially when at the same time we're heavily under-resourced. We've got just so many different volunteers that are invested in working with us. Sometimes we've got limits to how much funding we have access to. What I would propose is that how we speak to power in our work is the primary hurdle to us engaging with each other, to building trust to a level where it would allow us to work together. So I'm going to work at a couple of different things. So physical spaces and virtual spaces, basically sites that are out there that exist in which we can meet one another to engage in conversations and potentially move towards a sharing of resources, an alignment in values and collective work. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is social movements. And so we've got the civil rights movement, 1960s counterculture, Occupy Central is going on right now. And so what's really interesting about social movements is the fact that they're so incredibly powerful. There's an undeniable politics to social movements. They're incredibly polarizing. And so when we engage in social action, we can't help but be invoked by social movements. And so our work ends up getting either situated in relation to or in opposition to social movement. Social movements challenge our work, but they can also at the same time confirm our work. And so what I want to present in addition to social movements is this idea of forums. When I talk about forums, I'm interested in thinking about temporary sites, temporary physical sites where there's that potential for shared learning, for folks to come together, learn from one another, have a conversation, and then potentially kind of walk away the better for it. What's really neat nowadays, is there's all sorts of emerging forums, these physical sites. And to me, it's indicative to how important being in physical proximity to others has become to us who are engaged in work. And the other thing that I want to talk about is media platforms. And so here I've got web-based platforms, but this is a reflection that we could apply to anything that's really media-based. The web is not the only example of media. We've got radio, television, newspaper, and all of those, I would argue, met the same kind of dynamic. And so what's interesting about media is it does allow for the creation of permanent sites. That radio station that disseminates every Sunday, that radio show that's broadcasted every Sunday, that organization Unbound blog that's right out there, and it acts as a resource for folks that are engaged in reflections. That newspaper that's distributed community-wide. And so, yeah, web-based platform. But essentially, what I'm interested in increasingly in my work is to consider how we can move towards a blended model, but how we can move towards something that, on the one hand, acknowledges the social context, the political nature of issues, can respond to emerging social movements. Something that is permanent and is a central repository for information, and that does allow for the fostering of both physical and issue-based communities and dialogue emerging around them. I think this is actually one of the things that this group is currently invested in and developing, is to, one, disseminate, foster conversations, and allow for folks to talk to one another. So yeah, so I think that's why I'm excited to be here and to be speaking with you folks.